Maybe you can relate to waking up in the middle of the night and immediately remembering what's going on in your life and not being able to get back to sleep because stress. Maybe you can relate to not knowing which thing you should do next because there's more than you feel like you can do because stress. Maybe you can relate to not being able to focus on what you're doing because stress. All of these are experiences I've had. And the fact that you've clicked through this video tells me that you can probably relate to those, or you have your own experiences of stress that are at the forefront of your mind. I want to talk with you today about how to manage stress. Sometimes there are things that are facing us that we just can't make them go away when we would like to, because we think that would alleviate our stress. But ultimately, stress sometimes is just always going to be here. So what are ways that we can manage it so that it is not putting us in a position of unhealth emotionally, mentally, physically? So let's talk about stress today and how to manage it. My name is John Chandler, and on this channel, I talk about practical wisdom for mindful living and what can be more directly opposed to mindful living than stress and being consumed by that. So let me offer you some practical wisdom. I will say that I'm not going to cite scientific studies or journal articles about any of the things I'm talking about today. These 5 habits that I'm going to talk about are primarily from my own experience, although I do think I'm an avid reader and a lot of these ideas have been formed by my own reading. I do think you could probably find scientific data to back up all of these. That's just not how I'm going to frame this conversation today. I just want to share with you things that have been helpful for me in my life because I am no stranger to stress. So 5 simple habits to help manage stress. The first one I would talk about is a habit that I've talked about before. For me, journaling is a great avenue to help dissipate some of the stress that I have in my life. And it didn't used to be that way. In the early days of my journaling, I actually found that I avoided journaling about the things that were stressing me. I've previously posted a video that I'll share a link below. I've previously posted a video about how valuable it has become for me to look back and review my journal articles from previous years. And one of the patterns that I've been able to see as I look back is how often I was avoiding talking about things that were causing me stress in my journal. And over time, then I've learned that it's actually beneficial to name and write about what are the things that I'm feeling stressed about. What kept me up last night as I'm journaling this morning? What am I facing today that I don't want to do? And taking the time to name it there sometimes does one of 2 things. Sometimes it means that I start to get a little perspective on it and realize, okay, this isn't quite as overwhelming as I perceived it to be, and kind of naming it takes away some of its power, or at least puts it in its place. And sometimes actually I recognize, okay, this really is significant and I need to put more time into what this is that is stressing me out, so I can start to think about how do I move beyond or move through this stress that I am facing. So sometimes it is true that journaling will alleviate some of that, but it is also true that sometimes journaling actually elevates it a little bit. But I would say that that is a good thing for the purposes of this video, because it helps you see how it fits in your life and start to create actions in order to respond to it. So the first habit I would say is journaling. The second one that I would talk about, second practice, the second habit, I would call practices of stillness. And this is kind of a broad umbrella because how you might practice practices of stillness might be different from someone else. But this might be as simple as just breathing exercises, maybe using an app that's on your phone or on your watch to just pause and breathe for a little bit. So practices of stillness can simply be breathing, to be aware of how much of the stress you are carrying in your body and to take some slower, deep breaths to reset your body a little bit. It also might be practices like meditation. And again, maybe you use apps for this. Maybe you've been meditating for a long time. Maybe you would like to learn. There are great apps that can guide you through it and other resources that are available. But meditation can also be really beneficial. Of course, it's adjacent to breathing, but it's just a practice of slowing down and being present and kind of resetting all of the things that are going on in your mind and in your body around stress. And then the third type of practice of stillness I would call is just some form of prayer, whatever faith background that you might come out of if you are involved in a faith background. I will speak to this one from a Christian perspective because that is my background. When I'm talking about practices of stillness, I'm talking about practices like maybe centering prayer, where you just slow to dwell in the presence of the sacred, or maybe even something, if you like a little more structure, something like Lectio Divina, where you just stop and linger on the words of a sacred text. So practices of stillness, whether breathing or meditation or more contemplative kinds of prayer. The third practice, the third habit I would encourage you to consider actually goes really well with these two, because I find that sometimes after I do these two, I need to engage in this one, and that is just physical engagement. Now, physical engagement could be a lot of things. It could be exercise, right? It could be very intentional. It can be as simple as going for a walk. It can be practices that are slower, like yoga and stretching. It can be practices that are more intensive, more aerobic activities. Personally, I find that even just getting out to walk the dog, who was making so much noise just a moment ago that maybe some of those sounds even came through in the video, but getting out to walk the dog just to get your body moving, get your heart rate up a little bit and move some of that through your body is really important. I mentioned earlier that sometimes when you're journaling, you actually might take on more stress. And so often I find that it's good, and almost every morning, except for in the heat of the summer, I actually walk the dog after my journaling, so that if something does elevate me a little as I'm writing about it in journaling, I can kind of work some of that out as I'm walking the dog. So journaling, practices of stillness, physical engagement. The fourth one is human connection. I can't speak highly enough about how valuable it is to sit with another person in person. Occasionally, if you have to do this over the phone or virtually, that could be beneficial as well. But I can't say enough about how valuable it is to sit with another person who will simply say, "How are you?" And you know you can respond without holding anything back. One of my life rhythms that's really important to me is I try to make sure at least one time a week I am meeting with a friend of some kind. I'm getting together. We get together in the morning for coffee, or we get together for lunch, or we get together in the evening for other beverages, just to have a chance to say, "How are you? What's going on?" I have a friend I get together with every couple of weeks. I have some friends that I get together with once a month, but I just try to have enough connection and enough friends that I know that there are people who are aware of the things that have been stressors for me in my life. And I know that they will look back at me and say, "Gosh, that is hard." And even hearing somebody acknowledge how hard something is can be so helpful for working through your stress and letting someone else see, yeah, it makes sense that you're stressed. That's hard stuff that you're going through. Now, of course, if you have a significant relationship with a loved one, that can be part of this too. But I encourage you to have other voices, even beyond that, who you regularly connect with. People who can simply say, "How are you?" Relational connection, human connection, a fourth habit, a fourth practice for managing stress. And then number 5, I want to be kind of cautious about, because I think it can be beneficial and I think it can not be beneficial sometimes as well. And I'm simply going to call this one recreation. And I want to give you permission that sometimes it is okay to just check out, to just disengage. And so maybe that means you have your guilty pleasure TV show, or you want to take some time to watch a movie, and you just know that when you watch that, it is going to take you out of your current situation and maybe even perform a little bit of a reset for you. The reason I give pause about this, and I only named watching things there, this might be for you reading a book. Maybe that really disengages for you. This might mean going to some kind of public event, some kind of concert, some kind of festival, something like that. All of those things can be good because they pull you out of the stress of the moment. But the reason I want to give cautious to this is that is also a pathway to addiction, because addiction is anytime we rely on something to help us to escape. And I would say that even when we're talking about entertainment kind of things, we can start to use them in an almost addictive quality because we use them to avoid the tension and avoid the stress of our life rather than acknowledge it and rather than face it. You find activities that give you life or help you to disengage from what you're dealing with in the moment and help kind of reset a little bit. But also just be aware and be cautious that those don't become activities that might be addictive to you. Ultimately, the reason that we have stress is because life is tension and we grow through tension. So we don't want to be fueled by stress, but we want to recognize that some of that tension, some of that friction in our life is what helps us to grow. So we're not necessarily going to avoid the things that give us stress. So what about you, though? These are 5 things that are beneficial for me, helpful for me. It's certainly not a comprehensive list. I'm aware that right over my shoulder back there is a guitar that is dusty and I don't play it nearly enough. And I would love for that to be my 6th habit. But right now, thinking about playing my guitar just creates more stress because it's one more thing I feel like I want to do or one more thing I feel like I got to do. But I'd love to hear from you in the comments below. What are practices or what are habits that work for you to minimize or reduce stress? What are habits or practices that you find beneficial? And also, if you have thoughts on any of these that I've shared or maybe more to add to any of these, I would welcome that as well. If you find this valuable, if you find this beneficial, I would love to hear from you about that in the comments as well. But primarily, I would love it if you would consider hitting a like on this and sharing this video with others, or subscribing to this channel where I regularly talk about stuff like this. Practical wisdom for mindful living. Thank you.